It's actually crazy when you really start reading through this stack of sources we have for today.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
I want to welcome you all to the deep dive today. And our mission here is really to unpack this idea that social media didn't just passively reflect society's problems. It actually engineered this new polarized reality we live in, basically by exploiting human psychology for profit.
Right, and it's a heavy topic. We're relying a lot on excerpts from Max Fisher's book, The Chaos Machine, for this.
Yeah, the contrast Fisher sets up right at the beginning is just stark. You have these descriptions of a modern Silicon Valley headquarters, right? Multi-million dollar campuses.
The glass walls, the custom murals.
Exactly. It looks like a modern art museum. Endless free gourmet food. It projects this image of like absolute masterful control over the world. But then you look at the other side of
Mhm.
this global machine,
The reality on the ground.
right? This bleak, cramped, outsourced content moderation office halfway across the world. And there's this young moderator, our sources call him Jacob, and he is just staring at a screen, watching global extremism and violent hate speech literally spiking in real time.
Yeah, and he's frantically trying to sound the alarm.
Right. He's sending these desperate warnings up the chain, basically screaming that the system is breaking down. And the executives in that beautiful California building, they literally can't hear him. Like they have absolutely no control over the machine they built.
It is a profound systemic disconnect. You have the people designing the architecture completely isolated from the people who are essentially sweeping up the wreckage. And, it's not because the executives were actively trying to ruin the world. It's because the system was doing exactly what it was programmed to do.
I mean, I love the analogy from the text on this. It's like walking into a cigarette factory.
Hmm.
You find the executives on the top floor, and they look at you with this genuine, wide-eyed confusion, saying they simply cannot understand why people keep complaining about the health impacts of the little cardboard boxes they sell.
Right, they just don't see it. Or they choose not to see it because the margins are so incredible.
Exactly. And, for you listening right now, this isn't just a tech story. This is a story about your own brain. It's about how the apps sitting in your pocket right now are silently pulling your strings.
To really understand why Jacob's warnings from that bleak office were totally ignored, we have to look past this idea of uh, bad actors somehow hacking a good system. We have to look at the engine that demanded those warnings be ignored.
The core business model.
Exactly. User engagement at absolutely any cost.
Okay, let me stop you there, because there's a story in the research about an analyst named Renee DiResta that really, really messed with my head.
Oh, the vaccine story.
Yeah. So she lives in California, just had a baby, and realizes her local preschool has a terrifyingly low vaccination rate, like I think it was 30%.
Yeah.
So she decides to organize local moms to promote vaccines. But when she uses the platform's search tools and just types in vaccines, it doesn't suggest pediatricians.
No, it does the exact opposite.
Right. It aggressively recommends anti-vax conspiracy groups.
Mm.
And then it starts pushing her toward totally unrelated, bizarre claims, like the Zika virus being a manufactured plot. Why would a platform intentionally radicalize a mom who is just looking for standard healthcare info?
Well, that's the key right there. The platform didn't intentionally try to make her an extremist. It has no concept of truth or public health. The algorithm only understands one metric, which is time spent on the site.
Just keeping eyes on the screen.
Right. And DiResta realized something crucial about human behavior that the algorithm had also figured out. A mother who accepts the vaccines are safe, she doesn't spend a lot of time arguing about it online. She gets her kid the shot and she goes to the park.
She just goes on with her life.
Precisely. But a mother who believes there is a vast, shadowy medical conspiracy endangering her child, she is in a state of primal threat. She will spend hours, days, weeks online.
Oh, wow.
She will research, she will argue, she will join groups. The algorithm realized mathematically that pushing conspiracy theories maximized time on site. The recommendation engine wasn't just catering to existing extremists. It was actively manufacturing new ones because, well, panicked people don't log off.
But, why does that work so well on us? I mean, I consider myself a pretty rational person, but I know I've spent an hour rage scrolling before. Are we really basically just Pavlov's dogs?
To answer that, we have to talk about something evolutionary psychologists call the sociometer.
The sociometer, okay.
Yeah, so humans evolved in small nomadic tribes, right? Your survival depended entirely on your standing within that group of maybe 150 people. If the tribe didn't like you, or if you were cast out, it essentially meant death. You couldn't survive alone.
So you had to care what people thought.
Exactly. So over hundreds of thousands of years, we evolved this internal subconscious gauge, the sociometer, to constantly monitor how our tribe perceives us. We experience the readings of this gauge emotionally as self-esteem, pride, or deep shame.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. We are literally hardwired to crave social validation just to stay alive. And social media just hijacked that gauge.
It digitized it, and then it paired it with a psychological mechanism called variable intermittent reinforcement. It's what the product consultant Nir Eyal calls the casino effect.
Wait, are you saying we were basically just playing slot machines when we open these apps?
In a very literal sense, yes. Think about the mechanics of a slot machine. You pull the lever, and you don't know if you'll win or lose.
Right.
That unpredictability, that suspense, it triggers a massive release of dopamine in your brain. Actually, more than if you knew you were going to win every time. Social media put a slot machine in your pocket.
That is so true.
You post a photo or a comment. Will you get 100 likes? Will you get nothing? Will you get publicly mocked? You don't know until you pull the lever by opening the app. That intermittent reward system creates a compulsive neurological loop.
And the people who built this knew they were doing it.
Yeah.
Like, that's the wild part. Sean Parker, Facebook's first president, openly admitted this. In the sources, he explicitly says they created a social validation feedback loop exactly to exploit a vulnerability in human psychology. They knew they were hacking the brain with dopamine hits, and they launched it anyway.
Which forces us to look at the environment that produced this technology. If these platforms are essentially psychological slot machines hijacking our primal survival instincts, what kind of culture builds a system this manipulative and thinks it's a good idea?
Well, the sources trace this back to the Silicon Galapagos and the Santa Clara Valley. We're talking about the 1950s here. The Cold War is raging, and the military is pumping massive amounts of money into aerospace and tech on the West Coast, specifically to keep it far away from the East Coast population centers.
Right. It was this totally isolated ecosystem. And right next door, you have Stanford University, which started intentionally blurring the lines between academic research and corporate for-profit ventures.
Yeah.
They created a very specific philosophical environment where advancing human welfare and getting massively rich were viewed as the exact same thing.
But the actual cultural DNA, like the personality of Silicon Valley, that starts with William Shockley, right?
Yes, absolutely.
He wins a Nobel Prize for his work on semiconductors. Brilliant mind, but famously, notoriously abusive and difficult to work with. He moves out to the Valley and starts hiring other brilliant misfits, people who didn't really fit into the polite, buttoned-up, suit-and-tie corporate culture of the East Coast.
His company culture was incredibly toxic. Eventually, his best engineers defected, but they stayed in the Valley. And because they stayed, the venture capital funding model grew up specifically around them. Investors started funding people who looked and acted like them. The eccentric, combative, socially inept tech genius became the idealized archetype.
It's like filtering out social niceties as a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. It was a culture that actively rewarded a certain kind of misanthropy as long as it produced brilliant technical results. Now, mix that combative tech bro culture with the 1960s counterculture of the Bay Area, and you get the foundational ideology of the early web. You had things like The Well, one of the first major social networks, and John Perry Barlow's Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace.
Yeah, I read that part. They genuinely believed that a totally unmoderated internet, governed only by the raw will of the majority, would create a utopia.
They really believed that absolute free speech, with zero rules, zero friction, and zero authorities, would naturally result in an enlightened global meritocracy.
But hold on, if you build a digital society designed by people who inherently hate rules, despise social norms, and lack basic social empathy, don't you just end up with Lord of the Flies?
Very much.
I mean, it seems like terrifying hubris. The sources even quote an early investor saying he looked for founders with a piratical gleam in the eye. They were building global communication tools for billions of people with the mindset of internet pirates.
And that hubris is exactly what collided with human nature. That naive libertarian hacker ideal first exploded in the darker corners of the internet, where it proved that online outrage wasn't just harmless digital noise, it had devastating real-world consequences. It really started with the birth of organized trolling on early sites like 4chan and Reddit,
where the whole culture was built around pushing boundaries for the lulz, like laughing out loud at someone else's genuine anguish.
Yes. The more transgressive and cruel your prank was, the more social status you gained in those forums. It was an environment perfectly primed for the weaponization of identity. And the major flashpoint for that, the moment it spilled out of the dark corners, was Gamergate in 2014.
This story is so intense. It starts when a programmer posts this rambling, completely fabricated 10,000-word manifesto accusing his ex-girlfriend, an indie game developer named Zoe Quinn, of sleeping with a reviewer to get good press for her game.
And just to be clear, the review in question didn't even exist. The game had never been reviewed by that site. But the facts didn't matter at all. What mattered was the narrative it provided.
Right? It gave this massive, disorganized group of young men a target. They felt their identity as gamers was under threat from feminism and shifting cultural norms, and the harassment was just apocalyptic. They didn't just insult Zoe Quinn and other women in the industry, like developer Brianna Wu. They doxed them.
It went into the real world.
Yeah, they sent death threats containing the actual floor plans of these women's houses. They swatted them, calling armed police to their homes under false pretenses, hoping they'd be shot. Women were literally driven out of their homes.
And when platform leaders tried to implement basic moderation to stop the bleeding, the system fought back violently. The deep dive sources detail Ellen Pau's brief time as the CEO of Reddit. She tried to implement fundamental basic rules. She banned non-consensual revenge porn. She banned explicitly hateful communities, like a notorious subreddit called Fat People Hate.
And the users completely revolted. They subjected her to a massive, misogynistic, and racist harassment campaign until she was forced to resign. It just makes me wonder, is everything just Gamergate now?
In many ways, yes. Gamergate was the ultimate proof of concept. It proved that these social media algorithms naturally reward and scale identity-based conflict over everything else. If you frame an issue as an existential threat to someone's tribe, the engagement metrics go through the roof. It became the blueprint.
Wow.
And from there, the major platforms deliberately altered their networks to supercharge this dynamic. They started actively overriding our natural neurological limits.
Okay, I definitely need some help understanding this next part. The sources talk a lot about the Dunbar limit and how breaking it is what made everyone so angry. What exactly is the Dunbar limit, and why does breaking it matter so much?
The anthropologist Robin Dunbar found that the human brain only has the cognitive capacity to maintain about 150 stable social relationships. That's our hard limit. We simply can't process deep empathy for thousands of people at once.
Okay, so just 150 people.
Right. But around 2013, Facebook's user growth started to stall. To fix it, they actively engineered the platform to break the Dunbar limit. They started aggressively pushing users into massive groups of weak ties, friends of friends, or massive topical groups with hundreds of thousands of strangers.
And the sources compare this to studies on macaque monkeys, right?
Yes. Primatologists know exactly what happens when you do this. When you force monkeys into unnaturally large groups that exceed their cognitive limits, they become highly aggressive.
Right.
Yeah, they form intense factions and become obsessed with ruthlessly enforcing social hierarchies. These digital megagroups on Facebook bred exactly that kind of primate hostility.
So it basically broke our brains by overwhelming our social capacity. And it weaponized something the researchers call moral outrage. There's a researcher named Billy Brady who connects this to something called sentimentalism.
Moral outrage is a vital evolutionary tool. In that small tribe of 150 people, you need everyone to follow the rules so the group survives the winter. So when someone violates a social norm, you feel an innate emotional drive to punish them.
Makes sense.
And crucially, you want the rest of the tribe to see you punishing them so you can win the community's approval and raise your own sociometer rating.
They even proved this is hardwired into us with infants. But the researchers did an experiment where babies watched a puppet show. One puppet was nice, one was mean. The babies not only wanted to punish the mean puppet, they wanted to reward other puppets who were cruel to the mean puppet. It's built into our DNA to punish norm violators.
And social media platforms discovered that triggering this innate drive for moral outrage generated massive, cheap engagement. The UI of these platforms, retweets, quote tweets, the total lack of friction, makes it incredibly easy to pile onto a target without feeling any of the human empathy you'd feel if you were yelling at them in person.
That perfectly explains the endless online shaming mobs in the sources. I mean, instead of listing all of them, let's just look at what happened to Adria Richards. She was a woman in the tech industry attending a massive developer conference. She hears two men behind her making inappropriate juvenile jokes. So she takes a photo of them and tweets it out to her followers, essentially saying, this is why women don't feel welcome in tech.
Right. And in a normal physical world, that's a localized conflict. Maybe she turns around and tells them to stop. Maybe she tells a conference organizer. The context remains contained to that room.
Exactly. But on Twitter, the platform completely flattens the context. The algorithm pushes the outrage viral instantly. A localized annoyance becomes a global scandal.
Yeah.
The internet mob gets the men fired from their jobs.
But it didn't stop there.
No. Then a countermob forms, deciding that she is the real norm violator for ruining their lives over a joke. They swarm her employer, they hack her accounts, they send death threats until her company fires her too.
The algorithm didn't care about the truth, the context, or the human collateral damage. It only cared about the engagement generated by the friction. Whether the mob's original cause was left-wing or right-wing, the mechanism of destruction was identical.
So what does this all mean? It's like moral outrage on social media is like junk food. It's a vital evolutionary survival trait like seeking calories or seeking tribal cohesion that the platforms have mass-produced and exploited until it makes us deeply sick. But if Gamergate and these shaming mobs prove this outrage engine worked on niche internet forums and Twitter fights, what happens when you plug that exact same engine into a fragile real-world democracy?
That is the most tragic part of the research. You move from ruined personal reputations to massive geopolitical crises. And the clearest example of this is Myanmar.
This part of the book is just haunting. Myanmar essentially went from zero internet access to full smartphone saturation almost overnight. And Facebook made a specific business deal to zero-rate their data there. What does that actually mean in practice?
Zero rating means that using the Facebook app didn't count against a user's cellular data cap. In a developing country where data is incredibly expensive, that is a massive incentive. So for millions of people in Myanmar, Facebook wasn't just a website or an app. It literally was the entire internet.
Wow.
All news, all communication flowed through this single algorithmic feed.
And extremist Buddhist monks, like a man named Wirathu, realized how the game worked. They saw that the algorithm rewarded fear and tribal threat. So they used Facebook to spread lethal, completely fabricated rumors about the country's Muslim minority. They claimed Muslims were stockpiling weapons or committing horrific crimes.
And because those posts generated intense identity threat and moral outrage, the algorithm amplified them to millions of people. This directly fueled the Mandalay riots. Innocent people were murdered.
It's awful.
And despite desperate warnings from people on the ground, remember Jacob, the moderator, from the beginning of our deep dive. Facebook executives completely ignored the red flags until the violence had spiraled into a catastrophic human rights crisis.
It's staggering. A localized rumor in Myanmar becomes a lethal riot because of lines of code written in California. And I mean, back in the United States, we saw the exact same political weaponization during the 2016 election.
And it's crucial to understand that this wasn't a political choice by the platforms, it was a mathematical one. The platforms naturally elevated hyper-partisan outlets like Breitbart News and provocateurs like Milo Yiannopoulos simply because their content perfectly fit the shape of the algorithm's appetite.
How exactly did the algorithm do that, though? Was it just people clicking more?
It was baked into the design of the platform itself. For example, Facebook eventually introduced different reaction emojis, not just the like button, but the angry face. The algorithm was programmed to weight an angry reaction 5 times heavier than a standard, like when deciding what to show in the newsfeed.
Wait, 5 times. So if I post a picture of my dog and get 5 likes, and someone posts a divisive political meme and gets 1 angry face, the system treats them as equally engaging.
Exactly. Anger was mathematically prioritized. It didn't require shadowy hacking by bad actors. Breitbart simply posted their articles, and Facebook's systems recognized that their specific brand of divisive, us versus them framing, generated more of those highly weighted angry reactions.
So it just kept feeding it to people.
Yeah, it kept users clicking, arguing, and staying the platform. Even niche internet memes like Pepe the Frog were algorithmically boosted from obscure message boards into global political realities simply because they generated the highest friction and engagement metrics.
We've really covered a massive amount of ground here today. We've gone from the opulent boardrooms of Silicon Valley, where executives worshipped at the altar of engagement metrics, to the psychological hacking of our deep-seated evolutionary needs, our sociometers. And we've seen how that hacking scaled up to global outrage, the destruction of individual lives, and severe political polarization.
The mechanism used to build that connection was built almost entirely on friction, anger, and tribalism.
So, to you listening right now, the next time you are scrolling through your feed and you feel that sudden, intoxicating rush of righteous anger, stop, take a breath. Remember that you are not just passively reading the news. You are actively participating in a multi-billion-dollar psychological experiment
Hmm.
designed by people who are essentially exploiting your evolutionary instincts to keep you clicking.
I want to leave you with a final thought from the very end of our source material, something that really puts this all into perspective. It's about a Russian geneticist named Ludmila Tret. In the 1950s, she ran a famous experiment in Siberia with wild foxes. She wanted to understand the mechanics of domestication, so she took wild foxes and selectively bred them over generations for one single behavioral trait, which was friendliness toward humans.
Just their behavior, nothing else.
Just friendliness. But here's what happened, and it shocked the researchers. Over generations, breeding the foxes purely for that one social trait entirely altered their physical biology.
Really?
Yeah, the friendly foxes started being born with floppy ears instead of pointed ones. Their skulls literally changed shape. Their coats lost their wild camouflage and became spotted. By changing their social behavior, she fundamentally rewired their physical nature.
Oh, wow. That is wild.
Which leaves us with a chilling question to ponder. If social media is a massive, unintended domestication experiment, one that is selectively breeding human interactions not for friendliness, but for tribalism, moral outrage, and endless engagement, are we actually evolving? Neurologically and culturally, are we being pushed into becoming a fundamentally different, more hostile species?
That is, man, that is a genuinely terrifying thought to leave on. But it definitely makes you look at your phone a lot differently.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.